potential, we had to remove the weak from our society.
I'm your host, Will. Becoming an adult can be a right pain in the ass. At least, here on Earth. But what about on other planets? Like, say, the planet Viltrum? In this video, we're gonna go over what it's like to become an adult in the Invincible universe on the planet Viltrum. Let's get to it!
We'll have no treatment or cure, and no knowledge of who created.
From the very beginning of Invincible, we've known that Viltrumites are a society of brutal killers. When Omni-Man dropped his hero mask and massacred the Guardians of the Globe, we knew that he was raised in a sickening way. And when he told Mark that he thought Debbie was nothing more than a pet, that spoke to his upbringing more than Nolan himself. It's no secret that the Viltrumites believe in a might makes right philosophy, so we had no idea how deep that ran until we saw episode 2 of Invincible's 4th season. So, in this video, we'll be breaking down the Viltrumite Adulthood rite of passage and explaining why they're such a kill or be killed kind of people. How do Viltrumites figure out which children are strong enough to become adults? In episode 2 of Invincible season 4, we get something that wasn't in the comics. We see Nolan's backstory on Viltrum in detail, and to call it harrowing would be an understatement. Before he joined the World Conquering Committee, Nolan was an instructor who taught children how to live and embrace the Viltrumite way of life. And even that scene was hard to watch, because it showed us just how they gauge who's allowed to make it to their teenage years. Nolan's recruits were a group of half a dozen children, all of them standing at attention. This is not a surprise, because Viltrumites are a highly militaristic species, so it makes sense that military discipline is drilled into them from a very young age. That's also why we're calling these kids recruits, because Nolan's way of teaching them their people's history is more drill sergeant than wholesome educator. As they stand in front of the statue of the first emperor of Viltrum, Nolan asks them who that is, and they give the right answer. It's Argal, the man whose tyrannical philosophy unleashed the Viltrumite menace upon the stars. He then asks them why Argal gets a statue when their species doesn't treat other Viltrumites with such reverence. The kids give him the right answer. Argal united them, showed them that their strength was an asset, and opened Viltrum to the stars by turning them into space conquerors. All of this playing out quite similarly to how Saiyan society used to be in Universe 7 before Goku and Vegeta reformed it. But even the Saiyans wouldn't have done what Nolan almost did next. After asking the kids what happened to Argal, and the kids responded by saying he was killed by the betrayer, he expands on that information. He says that after Argal's assassination, the Great Purge followed, and millions of their species died during it. He then singles out one of the kids and asks her why the purge was a blessing, and when she hesitates for a couple of seconds, Nolan kneels down beside her, places his hand on her head, and tells her to really think about the answer because she has seen what quote-unquote failure begets. When she gives the right answer, which is the purge making them stronger, he lets his hand linger on her head for just a moment before pulling it away. This moment was accompanied by menacing background music, and the implication here was that if she'd said anything else, Nolan would have crushed her skull right then and there. That's the consequence of failure in this society. And as he proceeds to explain how Argal showed them the way even in death, he gives us the primary reason why Viltrumites are the way they are. When talking about the purge, he says that culling of weaker Viltrumites was seen as the removal of cancer, which is quite an extreme stance to take, but is also the truth that they've known since Argal's death. Then we get a bit of good old Viltrumite propaganda, when Nolan says that if their strength wasn't meant to give them the universe, then they wouldn't have been able to take it. In this era, all members of his species believe that it is their fundamental right to conquer and subjugate other races because their strength alone qualifies them for that task. And rather ominously, the kids say in unison the one thing that's made the Viltrum Empire so massive and despotic: all is ours. The idea that everything belongs to them permeates throughout their society, and being pleased with the answer, Nolan declares their education for the day is over. He then tells them to find shelter and food, and return to the same place the next morning, prepared for combat. If they're smart, they'll bring a weapon, because he estimates that at least 2 of them will die. The kids size each other up before leaving, and this reveals how horrifying Viltrumite upbringing really is. It's quite Spartan in a way, because the fact that he told them to look for food and shelter means that they're supposed to fend for themselves and stay in survival mode constantly. That's how Spartans train their hardened warrior class, and apparently, that's how Viltrumites operate too. The fact that Nolan told them to bring weapons if they're smart also reveals that though their society is heartless, it isn't impractical. We've never seen adult Viltrumites fighting with weapons, but these are children, and they're not at full fighting strength just yet. Plus, weapon proficiency will make them more versatile as warriors and improve their military discipline, and once they reach his age, they won't even need them anymore. So the transition from a child to a teenager itself is quite brutal in this world. Like we said in our intro, it's a kill or be killed society, and we did mean that literally. But at least these children are not being asked to murder their siblings to prove they belong. I mean, they might be, but we don't know that for a fact. What we do know is that the rite of passage for becoming an adult does involve one's family, and somehow that's even more horrifying than everything we've just said. What is the Viltrumite rite of passage to adulthood? Why is it so brutal? As soon as Nolan dismisses his students, 2 Viltrumites show up and start attacking him. From the look on his face, he was expecting their arrival, and he immediately starts retaliating against this male-female duo. 2 against 1 are terrible odds in any sort of combat scenario you can think of. But Nolan also has another disadvantage here. Viltrumites only become stronger as they age. Everything about them, from their physical strength, speed, and dexterity to their mental fortitude, becomes far more formidable. It's a bit of a reverse human situation, because humans need to put in a lot of work to maintain the strength and physical conditioning they had at their peak. This is why Viltrumites are more like Saiyans, because they both age slowly and can only get stronger as they mature and train. I mean, yes, Saiyans have the whole near-death experiences improving their strength dramatically buff, Zenkai boost and all that, but there's nothing in the comics that suggests Viltrumites don't go through a similar change. But getting back to the topic at hand, Nolan's 2 disadvantages start putting him in jeopardy quite quickly. His opening salvo was good, but as the battle progresses, the numbers catch up to him. The male Viltrumite restrains him, and the female Viltrumite cuts his chest open before admonishing him for forgetting that this was his day of adulthood. Everything we've said so far is consistent with how this society operates, and it's also a little grim, because Nolan's in a survival battle that pretty much mirrors how Viltrumites execute those sentenced to death. The only difference is that he isn't restrained and is allowed to fight back. But what's shocking is when he calls the woman attacking him mother. That means that the man holding him back is his father. And this is the true brutality of Viltrum's rite of passage into adulthood. They believe that up until a child reaches the age of 21, it's the parent's responsibility to make them as strong as possible, as hard as possible, as lethal as possible. Then, once that day arrives, they either verify the, quote, fruits of their labor, or squash the rotten apple like the failure turns out to be. The reason behind this cruel ritual is the Great Purge, because that changed everything about Viltrum's power dynamics. Say what you will about Argal and his tyranny, the one thing he didn't do was dispose of the weaker members of his society. Argal is remembered as Argal the Wise, because he recognized that strength wasn't necessarily physical. He gave a place to every Viltrumite in his burgeoning empire and recognized other forms of strength as well, like intelligence. But once he died, Viltrum fell into chaos, and his unofficial successor decided it was time to weed out the weak. The Great Purge was instigated by the one man genetically engineered to be the strongest son of Viltrum, the Grand Regent, Thrag. Thrag made the call to cull the herd and reshape Viltrumites into a strict hierarchy based on strength. He initiated many of the disturbing rites of passage we've mentioned in this video, and he did it because Thetis was most likely not a strong warrior himself. He was just strong enough to kill the Emperor. In the comics, Thetis worked as a member of the Viltrumite Council, and it's possible that he was a researcher or a scientist of some kind. After all, he helped engineer the Scourge virus after his betrayal, so it stands to reason that his background wasn't military. Thrag must have realized that to prevent such a thing from happening, he needed to inspire utter loyalty to the ideal of Viltrumite strength, and that, while the Purge would weaken their numbers, it would increase their power overall. He instituted the Strength First protocols we see in Season 4, Episode 2, which includes the Day of Adulthood business as well. In a way, the Great Purge is still continuing, because what Nolan was about to do to that kid he singled out and what his parents nearly did to him would have purged both from society. But obviously, Nolan survived, though he came pretty close to dying. His mom and dad gave him a good thrashing, and while his dad was impressed because he sent a chop through his old man's palm, his mom wasn't. Nolan's father stopped her from killing their son by arguing that he fought well and deserved his place on Viltrum. But his mother was a full believer in the kill or be killed philosophy, and she wanted to take this test all the way through. Either she would kill Nolan, or she would be killed by him, because in this society, that's how you become an adult. So when her husband stopped her from doing it, she called him weak and pathetic and left both him and Nolan, presumably never to return. Marriages on Viltrum don't follow the same pattern as they do on Earth. Husbands and wives are breeding partners at best, and when one of them realizes that the other isn't strong enough anymore, they move on to someone who is. That's why Nolan was so shocked that he'd fallen for Debbie, because his Viltrumite conditioning should have made him prioritize a physically powerful woman, and Debbie is a fragile human, someone he compared to a pet. All of Viltrum's history is steeped in blood and tales like this, where parents kill their children, teachers kill their students, and students kill each other just to prove they belong. And that's why becoming an adult on Viltrum is perhaps the most brutal experience we can think of, because it makes you live in survival mode 24/7, 365, or however long a year lasts on this accursed planet. Conclusion. But as for this video, that's all we've got for you guys today. What's the worst rite of passage you can think of from fictional or real history? We know which one's near the top of our list, but we want to know where it ranks on yours. Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Invincible content. We'll see you guys real soon with yet another video, so until then, stay safe and have a good one, and be grateful that we weren't born on Viltrum, because life there sounds rough, to say the least.